I love Greece. I love its sea, with those transparent waters and its coasts, with a barren appearance sculpted by the summer wind, the meltemi, which when it blows dries up the soil. I love those houses which seem to be glued to the rocks and where you notice very white walls interrupted by the blue color of the roofs. I love its food because it is made with simple and poor ingredients. I also love its white wine, which when you taste it the first time, offends the palate with that resinous taste. I'm always fascinated in the presence of those monasteries that, from Epirus to Mount Athos, the Greeks have built in the most inaccessible places, as if to meditate was really indispensable to get away from the world. I love the people of Greece who, always joking with a smile, remind you that
Italiani greci, una faccia, una razza, eccolo lì.
I also love the history of Greece, the history of Athens, of Sparta, and Thebes. Wandering through the streets of this country, one finds everywhere the evidence of a culture over 3,000 years old. Temples, statues, necropolises, and stones are the remains of cities that disappeared centuries ago. These are the vestiges of a culture that has profoundly influenced the Mare Nostrum. Wherever you rest your gaze, you will sprout something, in the worst case, a column with a Doric capital. But all this makes it difficult to bike around Greece. If you mark with pencil on a paper the beautiful things not to be missed, when you then join the dots, as in that game you played as a child, what results is not a drawing, but a set of meaningless lines, difficult to follow unless you stay here for a year. Do you think it is enough to make a selection? It is certainly not easy. I have tried, and in the end what follows is the tale of a journey. A potpourri of history, culture, gastronomy, and entertainment. And where could we start if not from the Acropolis of Athens? That magical place where, having passed through the gateway, you are catapulted back 25 centuries. On the hill of the Acropolis, the Temple of the Erechtheion presents one of the most beautiful Ionic colonnades in all Greece. And at its back, 6 caryatids support with their heads, without apparent effort, the roof of the Logeta. But above all, the Acropolis is the Parthenon, perhaps the most famous monument in all of Greece. A masterpiece in perfect Doric style that has towered over the city for 2,500 years. A design by Phidias and Ictinus and Callicrates carved the 92 metopes that adorn the temple frieze, which has miraculously survived devastation over the centuries. It was originally the Temple of Athens, then it was a church, then a mosque, and finally an explosives depot for the Turkish army. Unfortunately, it is useless today to look for the metopes. They were taken away by the British and today are on display in the British Museum. The Acropolis, the night before departure, explodes in a triumph of light. Hopefully we will see it again in a few weeks. At the start, Paul puts the cork of a famous local beer on the fork, while I put the cork of my favorite Greek wine, the Retsina. And on a frosty spring morning, with temperatures below zero and the unusual sight of snow whitening the hills near Athens, we begin our 500-kilometer-long sirtaki along the roads of the Peloponnese. The first stop is the Corinth Canal, which connects the Gulf of Thessaloniki to the Aegean Sea. The canal project was, in ancient times, an idea of Emperor Neron, who also began excavations, but however the cut was not completed until the late 19th century. From the bridge that disappears underwater, placed at the end of the canal, the work does not look like a great thing, but certainly, seen from above, the effect is impressive. Today's destination is about 30 kilometers from Corinth, where we stop for the night. A colorful Greek sunrise greets us before directing the wheels of the bicycles westward, moving some 20 kilometers away from the coast. That is the distance that separates us from the entrance to the ancient theater of Epidaurus. In this magical place, where perfect acoustics allowed that, from the center of the stage, the sound of the fall of a coin could be heard all the way up the last steps, 14,000 spectators were seated. And to this day, plays are still performed here, with the most important actors of Greek tragedies and Shakespeare's.
Friends, Romans, countrymen, I come to bury Caesar not to prize him. The noble Brutus has told Caesar was ambitious. And Brutus is an honorable man. So are they all honorable men.
Che sofferenza, che sofferenza. Vuoi provare tu, Paolo?
Sergio, non mi sembra un pubblico molto incline all'arte.
Tu pensi, eh?
Credo proprio.
Some theatrical careers last a blink of an eye and are nipped in the bud. We then resume pedaling on gravel roads, and invariably we get lost. But GPS is not an invention of the devil, and diverting a little here, a little there, we arrive in the evening at Nauplia, a tiny village with fishing in its DNA. Although looking carefully along the embankment of the port, the presence of the Falcone Maltese, an 88-meter yacht occupying almost the entire pier, suggests that tourism has now taken over from fishing. However, snow in Greece in spring for me remains something unthinkable. This weather that has not yet taken off the clothes of the winter accompanies us along the road that leads to the high ground of the ancient city of Mycenae. Always looking for gravel roads, we travel surrounded by long plantations of olive trees that alternate with plantations from oranges. Those oranges that picked at the side of the road still retain a Mediterranean scent that here seems even more intense than elsewhere. Oranges and snow, on paper impossible marriage, and yet this year it goes like this. The story of ancient Mycenae is a curious one indeed. It was the amateur archaeologist Erich Schliemann who brought it, at least partially, to light. Schliemann had long been known because, fascinated by Homero's tales, he found the remains of ancient Troy a few years earlier. And here he also recovered a treasure of gold objects, which he attributed with much imagination to old King Priamo. What happened to much of the treasure is unclear. However, Schliemann, not satisfied with success on Turkish soil, also set out to dig in Greece and unearthed the remains of ancient Mycenae. And along with the remains, he also found a long series of tombs. The most impressive one of all, he thought he could attribute it, without delay, to King Agamemnon. And the gold death mask found inside the tomb, according to Schliemann, was also the face of the ancient king. Although many experts firmly doubt that the mask is an authentic artifact. However, the remains of the ancient city, which is accessed through the Gate of the Two Lions, so named because of the decoration consisting of two lions arranged symmetrically on the entrance gate, are truly impressive, showing cyclonic stone walls traversed by long defensive paths along the walls overlooking a hill. From the hill, turning our gaze, there is a spectacular 360-degree view. Leaving the Lion's Gate, we will have to retrace southward the entire valley until we reach the sea and the village of Tyros in the evening. In the meantime, the intense cold continues to freeze our hands, and as spring is slow to warm the air, we can count ourselves lucky to find a guest house for the night. Night in freezing temperatures and in unheated and minimal accommodation. But in the morning we can enjoy the luxury of a pleasant awakening by enjoying a Greek coffee in the room, before setting off again for a day full of surprises. At any rate, in the morning the whimsical sun of the previous days seemed to have decided to warm our backs a little more. I don't know if I had mentioned it previously, but Greece, despite having no great relief, is anything but flat. And in search of little trodden roads, we end up getting lost in a maze of little roads full of ups and downs that, while pleasant and little trodden with beautiful views, force us to pedal always pushing. Then, damn it, the bright sun stops heating up. Then comes an intense icy headwind.
Chiudete la porta!
And finally we descend, before approaching the sea again, passing through fields where the snow, and we are in late spring, has not yet disappeared. We arrive towards evening at the medieval town of Monemvasia. Here in summer the tourist presence is impressive. It may be because of the cold, the wind, or the snow, but the walk leading up to the medieval fortress is totally deserted. As is deserted the access to the walls and the streets of the city, where if it were possible to find an open place, we would gladly order a hot punch instead of the classic ice-cold beer. But I repeat, this climate is not of Greece that I know. It is almost warm on the way to Sparta. Perhaps spring has finally awakened. We will see in the coming days. A small crossroads brings us with our wheels looking toward the ruins of what was once the legendary city. And immediately the words of Thucydides come to mind. If the city of the Lacedaemonians remained deserted and only the temples and foundations of the buildings remained, I think that after a long time posterity would not believe that the Spartan power was adequate to its fame. Of the ancient city and its glory, already from time immemorial nothing remains. Not even the theatre has been saved. A bucolic journey takes us back to the sea, near the beach of Glyphida. Here the wreck of the ship Dimitrosi seems to act as a gateway to the region of Mani. It is a ship about which mysterious stories have always hovered, giving it a sinister appearance. We arrive in the evening in the tiny village of Scutari. A church, 2 houses, and a small restaurant. The weather is finally nice and clear, but Greece's weather forecast for tomorrow guarantees rain and thunderstorms. And interestingly enough, the weather forecast is for once accurate. In Greece, this is a rare event. The exploration of the Mani is therefore postponed for one day. For those who have never been there, the Mani is the most beautiful part to visit in the Peloponnese. But if you do it by bicycle, keep in mind that in the Mani there is not an inch of flat road. It is either all uphill or it is all downhill, which puts a strain on your legs and tends to make your blood sugar plummet quickly. In addition, classic Greek taverns are scarce in this area, so it's better not to linger too long before refresh yourself, even to taste the fantastic Greek wine. The Retsina. The intense scents of Mediterranean vegetation accompany us to the southern end of the Mani. It is here that for the Greeks hid the gateway to Hades. And here we take a beautiful walk along the trail that leads to Cape Matapan, the extreme part of mainland Greece. The cape was feared by the ancients because in the presence of the Meltemi, ships could not sail up the wind. This meant being shipwrecked on the coast of Africa, but for us Italians too, Cape Matapan evokes sad memories. On the night of March 29, 1941, the British military fleet collided with the Italian fleet. They sank 3 of our cruisers, the Fiume, the Pola, and the Zara, and 2 destroyers, the Alfieri and the Carducci, which now lie somewhere off the cape at a depth of 4,000 meters. It takes a few more ups and downs to get out of the peninsula of the Mani, that ends after the almost completely abandoned houses of the village of Vati. The last few days have been intense with significant elevation changes, and the legs require some care and attention with gymnastics and stretching.
Fai Paolo,
Un po' di stretching.
fece allungamento, ma così lo fai tu in Grecia?
Questo conosco.
Ah no, ma dai, figurati, qui in Grecia non si fa così. Aspetta che ti faccio vedere. Da lì.
Pronto? Ciao Sergio.
Ciao Maria Grazia, come stai?
Bene, grazie. Tu come stai?
Tutto bene, grazie. Ti disturbo come al solito per chiederti una cortesia.
Dimmi.
Tu riesci a suonarmi, o se hai sotto mano un pezzo, un adagio che poi mi diventa un presto?
Dove sei di bello?
Al momento siamo in Grecia.
No, fantastico. Aspetta un attimo. Allora, dovrei proprio avere qualcosa. Ecco qua. Prova a vedere se questo ti va bene.
Era perfetto.
Grazie Sergio.
Leaving the Mani Peninsula, the road becomes less nervous, always alternating climbs and descents, but easier, and the views of the panorama remain spectacular. The wheels now take us toward the legendary site of Olympia, the site of the ancient Olympic Games. We leave dense vegetation on the right that hides the waters of the river Antaeus, famous because Heracles, in his fifth effort, diverted the course of the river and used its waters to clean Augea's stables by sweeping away all the manure. The legend does not say whether Heracles put the riverbed back where it belonged. I think not, because, given the lush vegetation, I think some of the manure is still lying around along the riverbanks.
To understand how important the Olympics were, just think that for the ancient Greeks, the year 0 corresponded to the year of the first Olympic Games on 776 BC. For more than 1,000 years, this place was held sacred. During the Olympia's wars, lawsuits and even death sentences were suspended. There were 100 bulls that were sacrificed to Zeus on the first day in the temple dedicated to him.
Past the arch leading to the track, where 45,000 spectators were seated, the competitions began. Initially, it was only running barefoot, starting from that marble line that served as the starting block. At the sound of a trumpet, the athletes would sprint the length of the track, which was 192 meters and 27 centimeters, 600 times the length of the foot of the god Heracles, from which it is understood that the size of Heracles' foot was 14.5. Then, over the centuries, wrestling, boxing, javelin and throwing, and finally horse racing were added. To the winner awaited only glory, a laurel wreath, and the right to put his statue in the enclosure of the sanctuary of Zeus. This place breathes an area of legends, of epic feats, like that of Melone, the wrestler who won 6 times. He brought from home on his shoulders the statue that portrayed him to put it in the enclosure dedicated to the winners. Never again did anyone win the Olympics 6 times, neither then nor now.
Paolo, alla vecchia maniera, allo squillo di tromba. Pronto? Bravo Paolo.
Sergio, quanto ti ho dato?
Il distacco?
Il distacco.
14 granelli di sabbia scarsi.
People who ride bikes know that the wind always blows in the opposite direction to the direction of travel, and the approach to Patras is no exception to this rule. Where once 2 fortresses prevented with cannon shots access to the Gulf of Corinth and the port of Lepanto, now stands a bridge connecting the Peloponneso with central Greece. The bridge is off limits to bicycles, but fortunately, ferries have remained active. With our wheels now pointing decidedly east, we leave the ancient port of the city of Lepanto following a coastline, where small fishing villages alternate with uninhabited stretches with spectacular views. Then at Mount Parnassus, which appears in the background, begins the long climb that, moving away from the coast, takes us to the archaeological site of the Delphic Oracle. Embedded among the mountains, the history of the oracle is lost in the centuries. While maintaining a central position in Hellenic tradition, it knows a long vicissitude of modifications and remodeling until its oblivion around the 5th century AD. The reconstruction of the Athenians' treasury and the remains of the most important temple, the one dedicated to the god Apollo, are clearly visible. Impressive is the theatre where the Pythian Games, precursors to Olympic Games, were held periodically, and a little further down the remains of the temple of the goddess Athens. From time immemorial, anyone could ask for the services of the oracle, upon payment of an offering and provided they knew the Greek language, the only language with which the oracle grants responses.
Ma Sergio, cosa c'è scritto qua?
Guarda, io non sono tanto sicuro, il mio greco è scarso, ma credo di leggere oracolo 3 euro. Faccio dare i numeri del Superenalotto, vediamo se me li dà. Tieni pronto il traduttore, Allora, Monteio, dosemao to numera to Superenalotto.
Ani είχα τα νούμερα εφέσου τα έδινα και Και ίσως πληρώνοντας 3 ευρώ είστε 2 παραπλανημένοι φτωχοί, επιστρέψτε στο πετάλι.
Cos'è che ha detto?
Ma se voi i numeri sul pedalotto li davo proprio a voi per 3 euro. Tornate a pedalare.
Ci ha zanzato 3 euro?
Sì.
Ci ha zanzato 3 euro.
It takes 20 kilometers of ascent to overcome the heights of Mount Parnassus, the last relevant obstacle standing between us and the waters of the Aegean Sea, just under 200 kilometers away. It would take much less than that to return to Athens, but it has been since we left that we plan to stop at Capo Sounion, where there is the temple dedicated to Poseidon that stands right on the face of the sea on the slopes of the cape. Of the original 42 columns, only 16 have survived the ravages of centuries, and the Vandals who over the years have enjoyed carving their names on the columns, including a certain Lord Byron. And yet it is easy to notice that there are 15 columns and not 16. Yep, it was the Venetians who stole one and placed it inside Ca' Foscari, after placing above the abacus a lion of St. Marco that on the surface looks more like a fluffy kitten. In the waters in front of the cape, plowed today by pleasure boats, the story goes that with an arrow shot by Apollo, Fronti, the helmsman of Menelaus, was killed and found his final resting place here. The stretch of road that separates us from the arrival is a pleasant routine, but I still have a task to accomplish. I have to figure out if Paul has finally converted to Greece and its flavors.
De Resina?
Il nettare delle idee.
Te l'ho detto, siamo in Grecia. È un vino che arriva tardi questo.